This MOOC is about how you can find the very important challenge that you work with within challenge-based learning. There's truly many ways you can find a challenge. It can be through external stakeholders. When you're in applied science, you often have a close connection to external companies, public institutions. It could even be the local supermarket and so on. But it's important that what they suggest is something that they beforehand don't have an idea of how to solve. So when the students get the chance, they have an intrinsic motivation of solving it, and they feel ownership over solving the challenge, because what people are suggesting is a true, wild, authentic challenge. It's called many things, but it's the same base in that. Or if you are a nurse or a social educator, it could be public institutions, kindergartens, teachers, it could be schools. I've seen all of these different challenge holders working within challenge-based learning within applied science. And it really makes sense when you get people from outside, when you get people from the professions and the jobs that students are having afterwards, because it's very motivating, and it also makes the competencies very real life proof that we give the students, because they are giving accordingly to what they are facing when they are not students anymore. So it's important with the authentic part. And then people often ask, but isn't it hard to get companies or public institutions to spend time with students? I find it very easy, to be honest. We have a lot of companies. Sometimes we even have more companies wanting to work with students than we actually have students having time to work with companies. And it's the same with public institutions. And I think that's a luxury. They want to be co-educators from the external stakeholders. Maybe they also want to recruit some students for the companies or for the kindergarten or whatever, and that's pretty okay. It's a win-win situation. And often it's very rewarding for the students when they solve the challenge, they present the action plan or the actions. It's very rewarding to give this positive real-life feedback from the ones that they are educating themselves to work with in the future. So it's, from my perspective, it's not very hard to find, but it's different, I think, in different cultures. But here in UCN, we have a really open stakeholders that want to work with students. When you choose a challenge, there is a balancing act. And that's actually the hardest part, in my opinion, as a facilitator within challenge-based learning, a teacher or a planner. That is the challenge that you choose, that it also matches the learning goals of this course that you're doing. This balance act is the hard part, because you cannot take whatever challenge. You need to also take a challenge that means that the students will learn what the learning goals are meant to be in different subjects. So you have to be creative in that sense as a teacher, thinking about, okay, does this challenge match the learning goals that the students have? And then you have to balance also within the course these two. So if you focus too much on the learning goals and what they need to have an exam in the end of the course, then maybe the external stakeholders don't find it so valuable what you produce if you do too much focus on the subject and not so much on the challenge. On the other hand, the balance can be if you focus very much on the practical part, on the challenge, but forget about the learning goals, then the external stakeholders or internal stakeholders, then they're very happy and find it very valuable what you produce because you spend all your time here. But what about the learning goals that the students also need to know about in their projects and for their exams? So when you really succeed with challenge-based learning, doing this balance, it's fantastic. It's intrinsic motivation for the students. It's real life learning, and it's a future aspect. And I've seen in many courses, I did all courses this way. I see they even get really good at the subject. They really get good grades at the same time. I don't see that as the goal of challenge-based learning, but it's a nice side effect, because sometimes people are worried they won't learn as much. But I see in the courses I did, at least, that they nearly learn more. And I think it's about that somebody really needs them to know about a certain subject. And in that way, a lot of students actually work harder because it's getting used, the knowledge that they gain. So in that sense, some of them is not just as important with the grades, it's more important what the external stakeholders think about the solvation of the challenge that they made. So this is how to find a challenge. This is some reflections around finding the right challenge, and that as a facilitator or planner within education, that means that you spend more time before the course than you would normally do, because you either contact the external stakeholder or internal stakeholders and make the agreement. It could also be startups from the entrepreneurial incubation environment, or you can let the students themselves do it. I often, when I have students for a longer period of time, I take the challenge and the contact to the external stakeholders to begin with. But afterwards, I let the students themselves contact external stakeholders to try to train the professional communication in doing expectations and doing the development contract and so on. It's a really good professional training. But maybe that's next step when they're used to it or they've seen how you do it. Yeah. So many things to think about with finding the right challenge, but once you find it, I find that it really works well with the motivational part with the students. The intrinsic motivation with the students I often see is very high in this way of working. So yeah, thank you for this. Listen to the next MOOC. Bye.